Hello, everybody. Once in a while, it is good to get the female perspective on the gospel. And since Father Tom is away visiting his friend Father Carl Rico at the Jersey Shore, this seemed like a good week to do it. So let's start with the gospel. It's from the gospel according to Luke. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach and say, "Give your place to this man." And then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes by to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have to repay. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." So when we hear this gospel, it's easy to feel a little bit smug, because who would dream of attending a wedding and just taking a seat at the head table? Nobody that I know of. So if that's the case, I had to ask myself, well, then why does Jesus feel the need to warn against this kind of presumption and arrogance? I think the meaning of some of Jesus's parables can seem simplistic on their face. Those tend to be the ones we gravitate toward because they seem to justify us in some way. Oh, I already do that, or I would never do that. But I think they always point us to something deeper if we're willing to do the digging. So today, the gospel gives examples of how the last shall be first and touts the virtue of humility. It also speaks of that in the first reading from Sirach. While we may give humility a hasty thumbs up, the fact is America and American culture is anything but humble. Thinking of ourselves and our nation as number one has become part of our patriotic DNA. Even as our systems of education, healthcare, and infrastructure have slipped behind those of many other nations, we persist in this belief, our need to view ourselves in the superlative. While there may be a difficult lesson in this, that's not my primary point here today. My point is that our culture, this culture that we live in, makes it difficult for us to be humble in the ways that Jesus suggests. As Americans, we grew up knowing and demanding what we see as our rights. We have and hold this idea that everything should be fair, and when it's not, we look to our legal system to give us back what we feel we're owed. I'm not against fairness or justice, but when our need for fairness extends to the minutiae of life, and when we go to lengths to constantly even the score, then I think we've lost the connection between fairness and justice and compassion. We see this in ways great and small. How offended we become when someone cuts the line or takes 25 items in front of us into the quick check lane in the supermarket. How irritating it feels when we brake and wave a car trying to make a difficult left turn against the traffic. And oh God, they don't even acknowledge it with a wave. Don't we at least deserve a thank you? Allowing these little things to happen without reacting or latching onto them, I think that's an easy way, well, maybe it's not so easy, but a simple way to begin to practice the art of humility. Then, in subtler but maybe more important ways, our need to point out others' faults, their flawed thinking, asserting our need to be right, possibly even at the cost of a relationship. Have you ever won an argument only to feel deflated afterwards? I've felt that many times in my life. Our justifiable anger at someone or some situation, the way we repeat the story looking for others to share our righteous indignation. Don't we feel smugly superior in these moments? And that is the opposite of humility. Humility doesn't require us to be a pushover or a doormat. Rather, that we simply and graciously set aside our ego and let it be. Or, if we genuinely need to defend ourselves or others, that we do it as kindly and quietly as possible. Let me just add that I'm not saying this because I do this well, okay? I just recognize the need to do it better. And also, I think that there's a big connection between this idea of humility and another of Jesus's more difficult parables that we hear in Matthew 20. The one about the workers in the vineyard. We all know the story. Some are hired at dawn, others at midday, still others near the end of the day, all paid the same wage. And just as the workers complained, our logical minds scream, unfair! And what does the landowner say in response? Are you envious because I am generous? Again, an illustration of the ego's need to assert itself, to settle the score, to ensure that we each get what we see as our due. But as metaphor, maybe what the story illustrates is that life isn't always fair. And what we need to do is to always try our best, be grateful for the gifts received, and humbly let go when the luck of the draw goes in another's favor. I know, so un-American. Interestingly, this vineyard worker parable ends with a line that we also hear resonating through today's gospel reading and in the book of Sirach. The last will be first, the first will be last. One last thought that powerfully resonates with both today's gospel and the parable of the vineyard workers. It strikes me that we're seeing the same response as we heard from the vineyard workers play out from many who paid back their student loans and worked hard to do so. The cries about how unfair it is to be forgiving these loans, how these people need to pay back what they owe just like everybody else. Could it be that making education affordable for more people and giving them a fair shake at life might be exactly like paying the last workers the full daily wage? Or are our egos more satisfied if the rest have to suffer and struggle as we did and perpetuate a bad situation? I'd suggest, humbly, that applying a little humility to the situation might bring a measure of compassion into the equation, as well as hope for a better future. Thank you for listening.